Alright. Well, first off, apologies. I did not realize I was not recording the mouse. Hopefully everything was still followable in the previous part, but man, that was not good. Anyway, so we just talked about materials and searching. And with that, we actually have a lot of the basics covered. We have navigating, we have creating new objects, we have moving them, we have adding components, all good stuff. So the next step, and when I've talked about the Unity way of thinking before, this is the Unity way of thinking, and that is prefabs. Prefabs are like everything. Everything will be a prefab. Not not exactly everything, but a lot of things will be prefabs. And what a prefab is it's a prefabricated game asset, right? If you have some assembly of game objects and you want to save their composition, their properties, whatever, you make a prefab out of it, okay? And prefabs, if your scene is just a collection of assets, okay, all those assets should actually be prefabs, and those prefabs are a collection of assets. And this allows you to change individual prefabs, and then everything that uses the prefab updates at once. So I could make anything a prefab, right? I could make my camera, my light, but I could make this hierarchy of geometry a prefab, okay? So to do that, I just grab the tree and I drag it in. And you'll notice a couple things. Now we have this new entry here in the Project Explorer, okay? And we get this cool, sweet little preview in the inspector of what we're clicking on. And yeah, we still get the inspector of things we click in the project view, okay? And that's important to remember, right? There is not really an inspector for folders, right? So that's what it looks like. So it is important to remember what you have selected. And this is another reason why I like to keep these windows close together. It's why I really like this layout, is I hardly ever mix that up. Anyway, so this prefab is exactly the same thing we have here. These blue objects just mean it's a game object, right? And you'll notice that now in the hierarchy view, this is blue. That means it is linked to a prefab. And you'll see that at the top of these objects, now we have prefab controls. We have select, revert, and apply, okay? So think of it like a file, right? If you have, dragging a prefab in is kind of like file save as, right? And then you can edit this here, right? And editing the root position is not going to do anything. I'm going to just edit this position of the sphere, okay? So I made this little change. I made this delta. Okay, I can just revert that change. Alright, and it goes back to whatever this file says it is. So I can use this prefab in multiple places, okay? I can drag out new copies of it. Look at that. Now I've got the same scene twice. Whoa! Also, another really useful hotkey is duplicate, Control D. Okay, and you'll see that now I have 3 of these, okay, and I can drag this away. Control D. Control D. We'll just have like whoop. This is a pretty rad scene, right? Like this is the one. So now if I hit play, see, look at that. Well, we still only see the one thing, but I can go back here, right? Like look at this. They're all doing the same thing. Okay, so these are all prefabs. They are all linked to this file. So a change that happens here should be reflected in these guys, okay? So I could change the sphere here, okay? I could move it. Look at that, and it's moving all of them. It's moving all of these spheres. That's because they're all linked to this prefab. Okay, and individual properties get linked. If you have like if you have a local prefab, an instantiated prefab. And an instantiated prefab is just something that is inside the scene hierarchy, okay? We've got this geometry. If I were to move this cube around, okay, and now I moved the cube here, okay? Sorry, I just edited the Y position. You'll see since the Y component was already changed locally, the one cube I already changed isn't moving with it, okay? So you can have prefabs with some changed things, but not everything, right? And that's really useful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to revert this, right? So reverting just says, you know what, make me the same as what the prefab is. But say I like these changes and say, okay, you know what, I want every cube to be here, right? So now that it won't like fall awkwardly on its edge, I can hit apply. And whoa, that updates all the prefabs. Now, this is like really, really powerful, right? You can have clones of objects that retain the same properties. Then you can edit the properties on those clones, independent or dependent with all the other clones. And that's, like if you're making a game that has lots of objects that are the same, you absolutely need to use prefabs. But even if you don't, you still need to use prefabs, okay? What if your scene got corrupted, okay? The assets, this is what, like, Unity structure is actually really powerful, okay? So if I open this back up again, say like somehow your editor gets messed up, okay? All these assets can be imported into another game. I could take this prefab, I have to do little things, but I could export it and then import it into another game and it would work just fine. That's assuming that I have all the respective materials there with it. So, okay, I'm gonna call some of these prefabs. I'm gonna drop them. But it's really important to understand prefabs. They're super nice. Okay, let me just get my checklist here. Okay, prefabs. All right. So, actually, I'll undo this. I did want to show you guys a little bit more about the materials. Okay. I remember, these change at runtime. These are also not linked to the prefab per se, so if I change this, right, you'll notice that it's changing all of these objects. That's just materials. And you know what, I will leave one... no, I'll just leave this guy in here, okay? So, what if you want to add in your own asset, okay? You're a 3D modeler, you're into Photoshop, and with that I'll open up Photoshop. Okay? How do you put in your own assets? Well, we kind of already showed that with, oh, pardon me, I've got some stuff already open here. Oh. Cancel. Alright. No. Alright. I'm making a new Photoshop document. Okay. So, sure. Okay. Alright. I'll leave that to the side for now. Okay. So, you want to make a 3D model, okay? I got Maya open. Okay, I'm just gonna make a. Let's make a cube. All right, let's change it up a little bit. Let's boom. It's gonna be the world's greatest. Whoop. And I'm not gonna go into anything about Maya in here, guys, but hopefully this is something you guys should already know if that's what you want to do in the game engine. And you'll notice that I keep trying to right click to move the camera. That is just a weird... Man, you use Unity after a while, any 3D program, right? Like you'll start... Oh my goodness gracious, I just gotta stop doing that. Okay, so I am not a Maya person, but this will do. This is a good looking model. I don't know what it is, but we'll use it. Okay, so in Maya you can export things, right? Like you can open scenes into other things, and you can do very much the same with Unity. And there's a couple really powerful ways to do it. So if you have Maya installed on your computer, you can actually just import the Maya file. So I'm gonna just save this to my desktop. I'm just saving an individual scene. I don't have a Maya project here. I'm going to make a folder for this tutorial. Let's see, intro Unity. And we'll call this, like, extruded block thing. Okay, cool. Let this chug. Okay. I go back to this. I can import assets, okay? And I'm going to do a little bit of folder structure to prepare for this. I'm going to first make a folder for my prefabs, because I didn't do that already. And I'm going to drag that prefab into it, okay? When you move the folders, everything stays synced, okay? If you were using some tools and you just moved the location of an object it was linked to, it would break. Not the case with Unity. I'm not going to explain why that's the case, but it's a really powerful thing, and without it, it'd be a headache. So I'm also going to make a folder for models, okay? And with your folder structure, it's important to group like-minded things together in terms of assets. this is an important distinction, okay? You don't want to make folders for things in your game per se, at least at the highest level, okay? Like if you have, let's say you have a character in your game, okay? Your high level folder shouldn't be named after that character, okay? Instead, you will probably want subfolders in each of your high level folders for that character, because you want your scripts, models, etc. to be separate. This is really important for some project management tools that we'll talk about later. But it just, in general, it's set up better that way. Like, you don't want to be mixing scripts with prefabs all the time. Sometimes you might. If there's a good reason to, you can break a rule. But not at this moment, okay? So I can import assets. I can import a new asset, okay? And I save this to the desktop, okay? And this is very similar to this is very, very similar to just dragging and dropping it in the System Explorer. But Unity does a couple of things when it imports. The reason why we needed Alt-Tab back into Unity was to make sure it did this. So if I hit Import, okay, let's just take a little second to chug. Could it be because I have it open? Strange. There we go. Alright. So, when you import a 3D model, a couple things happen, okay? First, it makes a new entry for it, and you'll see this. This means it's an imported asset. This just means it's like an external file, okay? And it creates materials. Hey, look, Lambert1, our good friend. And so now this is an asset. I can drag and drop it in. Look at that. That cool thing that I just modeled is now in my game. That is wicked sick. Awesome. Right? Sweet. We're making a game. So, alright. Cool. I've put a Maya file, and I've imported the asset. That is almost all you have to do. Okay? Now, the imported asset has a ton of different settings. Look at this. Alright, there's a scale factor. Man. So, hold on, I'm going to revert this. The transform has a scale property, right? And you can scale the object, right? And look at that, it's changing. The local scale of 1 depends on what it's been imported as, okay? So, like I said, it's in meters, right? So let's say your scale in Maya was different than what you scaled in your game. You kind of want to keep these the same, but let's say it was different, okay? You might need to adjust the scale factor. So if I said, you know what, 1, 1 is actually 2. Well, that's what happens. It's still 1, 1, but it's twice as big. This scale factor is probably the setting you will fiddle with the most. But there are a couple other things here. You can generate colliders for the physics system. That's super useful. Let's do that. Okay, and the reason why you want to do that is, well, you know what, hold on. Let me turn this off for a second, okay? Let me show you. So you see, there's no collider on this. If I hit play, look at that. They're just going to fall right through it. That's really weird. Okay. That's because there's no surface to collide with. It doesn't know to collide with that geometry because there's no collider component. And so what this does is it just says, go ahead and generate those, okay? It generates a mesh collider. And I'll talk about some of these colliders later, but look at that. See, now it goes. Look at that. That's cool. Great. Now we have like this ramp thing for our stuff to fall down. That's super fun. Best game ever. There's a lot of different things. Normals, tangents, stuff like that. Like, you can, when you calculate this, by the way, like, if you notice how there are, like, some weird things. When you model low poly, right, you're going to get some weird things, and these are things that you're going to have to start thinking about as you go forward. And, I hope to have another lesson where I talk about these optimization things and what it's like to model in low poly specifically. And with Unity in particular, but it's worth going over some of that now. Anyway, there's also rigging and animations, and what I want to talk to you about next is what I just did, save this Maya file. Never do that. Okay, so I'm going to open this up again, right? We've got our Maya ASCII file. Now it's inside this assets folder, right? And that's super cool. Like, it's super cool that Unity does this. But let's do a little thought experiment here. What do you do if the person you're working with doesn't have Maya? Okay. Well, this is going to be invisible. This isn't going to be here. This is why you don't want to export and import Maya files, okay? It's really cool that Unity lets you do it, and if you're working on a solo project, you know that you always have Maya, or say you're like in a limited amount of time, okay, go for it. But the reason why we have like standard file formats is to get around this, okay? There are file formats like OBJ and FBX. Oh gosh, there's colladas. There's so many different things, and Unity supports virtually all of them. And when you save your scene in Maya, you want to export it as an FBX. Okay. What's happening under the hood here is when when Unity sees the Maya file, it's changing it into an FBX file under the hood. This is what's happening. This is essentially an FBX object placed in our 3D scene. Okay. But it only knows how to do that if it has the Maya plugins installed on the computer. So without it, nothing happens, okay? And you'd have an invisible object. So instead, there's a couple different ways you can export as an FBX. So I could hit File, Send to Unity. I haven't used this one very often, but I believe that actually makes a new FBX. But I like to either use Export Selection or Export All because it gives me kind of control under it, okay? And I want to export it as in FBX. Okay, all right, sweet. It's an FBX. Okay, export. I'm gonna export it to the desktop. Intro Unity, and let's say FBX ramp thing FBX. Okay, horrible file name. Don't ever name your stuff that. Let's go to the desktop. Let me show you how the other way you import things. I'm going to pin this. Okay, so we have the FBX file, okay? And the great thing about FBX, right? FBX stores animation data with it, as well as like some of the material data. OBJ doesn't have the animation data. OBJ is really good for like static objects if you want to make it different, but everything should be in FBX, okay? Everything should be in FBX. Just use FBX. It saves us time to just go with that assumption that you're going to export things as FBXs. Don't save them as your Maya files, whatever. So, I'm going to actually go ahead and delete this, okay? And this is where things get weird. You notice that when I imported it generated a materials file. That was because the FBX had this Lambert 1 material with it. I don't want that. I'm going to get rid of it now, right? And you'll notice that the asset that this game object was linked to is gone. It's red now. And that's what will happen if you hand this off to somebody who doesn't have Maya installed, or something very similar. So I'm just going to delete the game object, okay? Great. Cool. Now, in addition to right-clicking in here and hitting Import New Asset, you can also just drag and drop your assets. Okay. Now, I did that and I dragged it into the root, and look at that. See, now I'll put that Lambert 1 material in the materials folder. I don't really want this to use Lambert 1 at all, but I'm going to leave it be for now. We'll just remember to delete that later, right? So now if I drag and drop this in, I'm going to put Generate Colliders on it. But see, like this is another frustrating thing, right? It's an FBX, so now things are like weird and small and not quite what we wanted. Well, this is where you can change your what's the word? You can change your options. I believe it's somewhere in here. Oh man! All right. Oh, I do not want to get into this too much, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of export options. And again, if you do send to Unity, okay. Where did I save my? No, my documents. Okay. There we go. We made, what do we call this? Intro tutorial project. Select. Okay, and a test. We'll just call this test. This is actually going to make another assets folder, which is not quite what we wanted, but it's pretty similar. It's the same thing, okay? That export to Unity. You just need to make sure that you set it to the root of your Unity project in order for it to work, and that can be super useful. But since this is really small now, okay, we just need to up the scale factor. And this is like not the best way to do it, but it should Should probably be exactly 100 times, okay? Uh, I will have to look this up and follow up, but this was exporting it in centimeters instead of the proper scale, and each editor is a little different. I am not a Maya expert, unfortunately. Anyway, this is now in there. We've got the collider. I hit play. Cool. Alright. So, what's next? Okay. We've imported from an FBX. So now let's start moving towards getting a scene we can walk around in, okay? One of the most powerful things about modern game development, or most powerful, one of the best things, something that hasn't always existed, is there is a huge infrastructure of different assets, okay? And Unity really led the charge on this when they created something called the Asset Store. So the Asset Store, as well as a bunch of other features, are available in this Window tab, okay? And we've talked about some of these, the inspector, things like that, your console. These are all things if you ever somehow close them, they should be here. But the Asset Store, and you'll realize that you've become a Unity user when you've actually memorized the shortcut to the Asset Store, which is Control 9, by the way. Felt kind of weird when I finally memorized. And the Asset Store is, well, it's a store of assets, okay? And things you download from here will pop up in your inventory, and yes, some of them cost money, but a great big chunk of them are free. So, for our purposes, we will ignore the paid ones for now, but if you want to fiddle around, there are so many good paid assets. There are some that make the editor just sing, and the editor's already super powerful, so things like a fully featured 3D editor, like modeling program is available. That an improvement to making your own shaders. But I'm going to just focus on top three for a second, okay? We have standard assets. Standard assets is part of the Unity published assets, and these are all free, okay? And standard assets, well, that's kind of what it sounds like. You actually downloaded this probably when you installed Unity, and I'm just going to go ahead and download this now. You will have to make a Unity account. You're going to have to make a Unity account, so go ahead and do that as soon as you can. I'm not going to show you how to do that, just you can make it on Unity's website. So when you download the package, it'll try to import it here, and you'll see it's kind of unpacking assets. It's handling your download. It's doing a couple things under the hood. And so standard assets just gives you, well, kind of what it sounds like, okay? Standard assets. There are a bunch of different components, and you can make so many different things. Oh, oops. Okay. You can make so many different things just with the standard assets. These are actually all of this. The one in the asset store is just the is a project, okay? And all I want is the assets. I'm going to show you how to do them yourselves. But if you want to look at like Unity's built examples, okay, of different projects, and maybe we can look at these after the fact. But like making a vehicle, all these different kinds of games, okay? This shows you how to do it, okay? But there are a couple different kinds of asset packs you can download. So there's the Unity standard ones, which are super useful. There are a bunch of free things, okay? I looked at this one ahead of time. There's this Nature Starter Kit, and this will give us some models and textures and things to play with. It's very important, especially like in a classroom environment, that you credit the people you get this from, right? That you say, yeah, I use this asset package. But for the most part, there should be no reason that if you just want to learn Unity, that you have to be a good artist ahead of time. Like, you can just start using these assets, and you know, some people say, oh, that's not as fun, but if you want to make a game, like, make a game. Don't fiddle too much with things you don't need to, and the asset store really lessens the time of development. So if you're working on a game, though, and you see an asset that says, hey, this does exactly what I want it to do, start thinking about, how long is it going to take me to do this? Will this asset save me the time? Is this asset worth the investment? If it is, just buy it. Especially editor ones. Like, they can be really useful. Now, not every asset has the best code. Your mileage may vary. And you, as the developer, need to be able to understand what's a good asset and what's not. And that comes with experience and experimentation. On your first project, I don't think there's anything you'll be able to do that will really just kill the engine, so to speak. You may make it perform poorly, but that's okay. Anyway, so this got imported, all right? And I'm just going to pop this up again. You can actually import assets you've already imported. So say like a new version comes out on the asset store, and you just go ahead and click import, and you'll get the same dialog, and it'll just show you anything that's missing. Otherwise, you just have a checkbox of stuff you can select, and you probably saw it briefly. Anyway, so now in the project hierarchy, you see Nature Starter Kit 2, okay? And Nature Starter Kit 2 is just going to have a bunch of different things. Usually they'll have some sort of README, and by the way, whenever you read a text file, look at this, you're going to get information, hopefully some sort of README. But let's take a look at what they have, okay? They have a demo scene. Let's check that out. Look at that. Wow. Okay. This is what they made with their asset package. Alright, and you could use these assets. They've provided them for free. Like, that's awesome. That community is incredible. So, we're going to take a few steps to make something like this on our own, okay? But first, what I want to do is make a new scene, okay? And I'm going to import a couple packages, okay? These are the packages that standard assets thing runs on, okay? And I am going to bring in characters. And characters is going to have our character controllers, okay? And character controllers are, well, they're the bomb, okay? Unlike game engines like Game Maker, you really can't make a game in Unity without scripting, okay? I don't want to give you the impression that you can do that. You won't be able to make a good game, at any rate. You'll be able to make something functional, but, and these character controllers I'm about to show you are not the best character controllers in the world. But if you really quickly just want to prototype something, right? And this is why Unity is super popular, is prototyping, right? This is the package for you. The character controllers are awesome for that. Okay, and very quickly, just to show you, remind you about prefabs, okay? We have that level geometry. I'm just going to drag that back in, okay? Look at that. Boom. We got the same level. Now, the model we imported, this guy, isn't part of that prefab, right? So it's not there. And I don't really want the ramp in there right now anyway. So I'm going to put this at 0, 0, 0. Let's look at what's the camera see. We'll move the camera up. And we'll... Whoa, no. Now we'll rotate it a little bit. Let's say down 15. Okay, good. We're going to leave this camera in a second, but let's just make sure that everything works. Great. Sweet. Okay. So, let's get going here. All right, let's make it so that we can walk around in this scene. I'm going to leave the Nature Starter Kit there for a while. You'll notice that when I imported that standard asset, the characters package, a bunch of things were created, okay? We have an editor folder now, and this just has one script, but this is what happens when you start importing stuff from the asset store. It's a double-edged sword. Your project structure gets a little bit out of control. And so you want to keep this under control. You want to keep it organized. And there are a couple things you need to watch out for. There are a couple gotchas, okay? Unity has some special names, okay, for different folders. Editor, standard assets, and resources, okay? And I'm gonna do this: editor, standard assets, and resources, okay? These are folders you typically don't really want to mess with. Is there a way to make this bigger? Well, just remember, editor, standard assets, and resources. Okay. You can mess with them, but you just need to make sure that scripts that were underneath them stay inside there. The editor folder is telling Unity that, hey, this is a script that runs inside the editor. It's not actually part of the game, but it's helping the engine run. So you may have a custom editor script that gives you like a new little interface that you wouldn't otherwise have in the engine. Super cool, super useful. Don't want to mess with it too much. So the editor, I'm going to leave be. But I do want to make an external packages folder. I think this is a good practice, okay? if you start having lots of assets, you want to separate what is and what isn't yours. Some people will actually put a folder, like a root folder, just for their own stuff. Uh, that can also be really useful if you're dealing with plugins in particular. Oh, yep, that's another folder, by the way, that you want to watch out for, is the plugins folder. Um, Plugins don't play well. Anyway, not super important right now. Just wanted to go over that briefly. Anyway, so let's talk about these character controllers, okay? Let me focus back on the geometry here. Standard assets gives you a couple different things, right? I mentioned physics materials. That's something it gives you. It gives you some utility things, a bunch of different cool things, okay? And you can do a lot of stuff just with these scripts, okay? If you're making a 3D game with like story-driven stuff, like you often don't have like a what's the word? Kind of like a standard setup, right? And so this gives you some components to handle a ton of different situations. It's super nice. Otherwise, these are things that you code for every game. But like I mentioned for prototyping, this gives you some controllers, okay? And controllers are things that you can move around with. We have the first-person controller and the rigid-body first-person controller. So the first-person controller uses something called a character controller, and you know what? I'm not even going to talk to you about this one. When I was learning Unity, this was the way you made a first-person shooter. As time went on, though, like it became really popular. Like you almost always wanted to use a physics first-person controller so that you could use the physics engine. You don't always want to use that, but for our purposes and for today, we're going to do that. Okay. The first-person controller like has its own collision detection system, and it's totally cool. It's what I learned with, but I don't think we'll cover that. So the rigid body first-person controller, again, we have first person and rigid body. Rigid body is kind of new. If I drag this in, okay, I get this cool-looking capsule thing, okay? Sweet. It's a capsule, right? Like, and this has its own camera, okay? And this is the first-person camera, and you can see its little preview there. I do not need this camera anymore, but let's see what happens if I hit play. Okay, now I am in my first-person controller, but that other camera's still there. So we'll do that. We'll talk about that in a second. But my first-person rigid body controller, look at this. I can walk around now. It's a video game. I can run into my cube. That's super cool. I'm gonna go, and I can jump. I can jump off the side of the world, and I'll just fall forever. So, let's look at a console. Okay, I mentioned this before. When you have warnings or things like that, they'll pop up here. This says there are 2 audio listeners in this scene. I mentioned audio listeners before. We only need 1 audio listener. We only need 1 camera. I'm just going to delete the main camera, because our first-person controller gave us a new main camera. And now that warning will be gone when I hit play. So, we have a couple cool things going on here, right? We have our level. We have objects falling in it, and we can walk around. Let's take a look at the first-person controller here, though, okay? There are a lot of different things that we can have. We have movement speed, we have a run key, so you can sprint. It tells you how much faster you run when you're sprinting. So you know what? I am going to, let's see. Look at this. This is what it's normally like, okay? And that's me sprinting. Want to be careful not to go off the side. In fact, I'm going to just make this guy a lot bigger. So look at that. It's going to make the cubes bigger too, but that'll be fine. Whoa! Boom, boom. Okay. So, without a frame of reference, this is not the greatest, but, you know, I can move around. Okay, so I'm going to pause. And I'm going to, let's like make the speed 20. Let's make the run multiplier like 8. I'm going to fly now, right? Woo! Whoosh. Real fast. Okay. Cool. So like all these properties in the inspector that you see are interesting. Okay, are things you can change. Let's look at mouse look. This is your mouse sensitivity. This is how fast you can move. Okay, so you can change these things. And it's good to know how to change them. So advanced settings. Let's see, where did... Try to find a couple different things here. There's a bunch of different settings. Okay, so air control. Sorry. We have whether or not you can change your direction in midair, okay? And I am going to up my speed again so that we can see this a little bit more. And I'm also going to make my jump force a lot higher. Okay, and since this is a physics controller, this is actually controlling the capsule, this invisible capsule, okay? It's just a collider. It's controlling it with physics forces and impulses, okay? So now if I move forward, okay, I'm going to jump. Whoa, look at how high I jump. I'm still jumping. Wow, that's a lot. So, that's what the rigid body FPS controller does. This gives us a thing to run around in, and that's pretty neat. And I was going so fast that I went right through the plane. And this is why physics can be super weird. Okay, so you just need to be careful with things like that. And you know what? It's really easy. I will show you the regular FPS controller. In fact, this controller makes... It probably feels a little bit better than the rigid body controller. So if you're making your own thing and this is what you want to use, go for it. But in fact, this one even has audio. Okay, and this guy should still interact with these, but what you gotta understand is this doesn't use physics. So if you are making a physics simulation and you need it to interact with your character, if you use this character controller, there are a couple special things you have to do to make that work right. And when we talk about scripting, we'll talk about this some more. And, you know, the mass of these objects is still only 1, despite them being huge, so it's not going to look the greatest. So, let's put these guys in a somewhat nicer environment, okay? We've got our character controller. So let's make a little terrain. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this geometry, alright? I'm going to make a terrain folder. Terrain is an asset. It's not a prefab, it's not a scene. And you can import models and use them as your environment, but let's say you have a really big environment, okay? You're going to need some terrain, and terrain is kind of optimized for larger scale stuff. It knows, you know, not to draw it at highest quality, use a little detail stuff. And terrain is a 3D object. Whoop, create some terrain. Look at it. We've got a big plane. Okay. And so terrain has... It's just a surface that you can collide on. You can walk on it, okay? So I should be on it, okay? I'm going to spawn right on the edge of it. Well, look at that. Cool. And you know what? I dislike head bob tremendously, so I'm going to check that off. Yes. There we go. Much nicer. Okay. So, when I made the terrain, look at this. I got new terrain. We'll call this just level terrain. Okay. And I'm going to put this in the terrain folder. Alright, cool. We've got some terrain. Now, terrain is not Unity's best feature. I'm going to be completely honest with you. It is not Unity's best feature. But it is certainly functional, and as far as like teaching some other things, it's a good idea to learn this because it gives you a good idea for prototyping. Which again, this is really why like Unity's super sweet. It is a great prototyping tool. The pivot point for the terrain is totally like in the bottom left, so that's why I was spawning at 0, 0. But let's look up some settings, okay? We have all these different options on the terrain components, okay? Settings is the one we want to look at, okay? We have terrain width and length and height, okay? I'm going to make a little bit bigger. Let's make it 1,000. Okay, look at that. Cool. And now I'm going to put this at -500, -500. Now, since it's 1,000, whoa, where'd it go? Whoop. Oh, that's right. I used. Oh, did I hit -5,000? Yes, I did. Okay, that's right. Remember, so it's in meters. So now that the pivot point was 0, 0 for the terrain, so if I moved it half of its width and height over, now I'm in the middle of the terrain. So now I look at either way. Oh, look at that. We're getting some errors. That's not good. If that's happening, it could be because your terrain's too big, etc. There's a couple of things that could be happening. 1,000's pretty big. You know what? I'll bump it back down to 500. But you can change the size of it, okay? And then I'm going to put this at negative 250. Negative 250. Okay. So, FPS controller. Boom. Alright. Cool. Now we don't have that error. Alright. So, terrain. Alright. Terrain is something that we can paint on. We can edit the heights. We can raise and lower it. So, let's say this first one's going to be raise, lower the terrain. Look at that. Woo! Right, we got some bumpy terrain. We can use different brushes. Get like some moguls going on. Can make a bunch of different things. This is not going to be great, right? And now, if I come in, I look around, look at all that. It's something. I don't know what it is, but it is something. And this might be too steep of a slope for me to climb up, but, you know, I can climb up it. We got a 3D game going on here. This is some sick Mario platforming stuff we got going on. So, you know, that's neat. We got that going on for us. Good. We can paint a specific height, okay? This will kind of like let us make plateaus. What's going on? Is that... Whoa, nope. Flattening it will make everything that height. Okay. We'll say 60. There you go. You see, now it's kind of plateauing out at height 60. And this will plateau out at the max height that you set. So let me make sure that this guy's not inside anything. Good. This is something that you want to watch out for. You don't want to, like... If my FPS controller spawned inside the terrain, that would be bad. And something you gotta keep in mind is that, like, there's no collision on the other side. It's one-sided. So, okay. Alright, FPS controller. Alright. We can do more stuff with the terrain. We can paint all this. We can paint a bunch of different things. We can smooth it. Look at that. We get nice smooth edges. You can do a lot with terrain. Things terrain doesn't do, it does not do caves. It does not do holes very well. It does not do a bunch of things, but it's really functional. So don't underestimate it. Don't forget it exists. But what we can do is we can also paint. Okay, we can paint textures, and we need to define some textures. So that nature kit gave us some textures, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new texture. We need to give it an albedo and a normal map. So let's look at some of these assets we downloaded. Okay, we got a bunch of good stuff here. What do we got? We've got probably some different grasses. Ground's good. Okay, we'll do ground. And we'll make this the base. And we can change the size of it and stuff. And if it had a normal map, we could also give it a normal map. Oh, does it have a normal map? Let's see, I use ground. Trees. Oh, those are normal maps for the ground. My bad. Okay. Well, never mind about that. Don't worry about it. Okay. Well, none. Okay, so hit add. Look at that. Now we've got our grass applied to everything. And if I hit play, super pretty. We got a pretty scene going on here. We can add more textures though. So let's add that glass texture. It's got a normal map, right? That'll be fun. Okay, and a normal map is just something that'll give it like a little bit of height, almost, or the deception height. And so this brush, right, I can paint on this platform, and I'll kind of paint in my spawn area. Okay, so this is where my guy will spawn. Now I hit play, and woo, look at that. I don't know what world where like stained glass is turning into grass, but it's in this world, and that's pretty cool. So we can add more textures. Let's add something. What else? Cliff. They have. I mean, you can turn anything into into a texture. Is there anything else that's worth... There's kind of like darker ground. Okay, here we go. We got some dirt. Okay, let's add it. And so let's say our dirt would mostly be on like the side of our cliffs. Okay, we can paint that on. And yeah, it just tiles on. It's super neat. Like, you're painting a texture. So it's I mean, this is a really cool feature. Don't forget it exists. We'll put some stained glass on the top of our plateau here. Okay, that looks really sweet. You know, there's nothing else to say. Like, that's, you know, stained glass. I don't know. So you can fiddle around with textures and stuff all you want. You can also place trees. Okay, you can add trees, and trees are just prefabs. It's it's a little cheeky, but you could make anything a tree. So that package actually gave us some trees, some pre-constructed ones. Okay, and I'll select a tree. I can add it, and then I get this. The circle is where trees are going to be placed, and then this value of density is what percentage of this is going to be filled in with trees. So I click, look at that, got some trees. And I start painting them, and just one click places trees. I'm gonna have a forest off to the side. Okay, and these trees are kind of optimized for running. That's not entirely true. You don't want to place a billion of them, but you know, now we have trees, and these trees have colliders, and there's a bunch of different ways that you set these things up. But you'll notice these trees are not part of the scene hierarchy. So if I pause, they're not in here, okay, and that's fine. But that's because terrain's doing some things to make sure that these don't draw. Like if you're far away from them, right? Like, or if this tree's behind this hill, we don't need to draw it. You'll notice that these shadows are popping in and out. These are all different settings that you can control on the terrain. So I'm going to undo my tree placement for a second, though. Let's take a few steps back. Okay, I'm going to add more trees. Add tree. Add tree. Tree 3. It looks like this even gave us some bushes. So add a bush. It's a little annoying you have to do this one at a time, but you can. Let's see. Okay, so I could see whatever one I have selected. Boom, there we go. All right, now I can place bushes. I can place different kinds of trees. And you just want to do this. You want to, like, if you're going to do this, place a little, get some variation going on. And in fact, you know, you probably don't want to have the density going on too much. You can randomize the height a little bit. Let's see. Not all these options necessarily quite work the same way, but like, you know, there's color variation. And you can, I believe, have any prefab as a tree. So if I make it like a 3D cube, okay, I'm just gonna quickly make this cube. Let's call it a tree cube. And I don't even need to know where it is. All I need is a box collider on it. I'm making it into a prefab, okay. I haven't used Train in a while, so you'll have to excuse me if this doesn't work the way I'm planning. But look at that. Yeah, it does. Okay. Look at that. We got a cube being placed. And there's a couple errors. There are more things you have to set up. But if you really want to go crazy with trees, you can do that. You can still place things in the level normally, right? It'll still happen. So let's see. Let's take that geometry prefab, okay? Let's put it here. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete, or you know what, that'll be fun. I'm just going to have these slide off. And the FPS controller is looking at them. Let's move our spawn point back. Cool. So these objects can collide with the world normally. So let's see, what else is there? I mean, that's a pretty in-depth overview of the basics here, but we can also paint details. That's right. And I think here you go. This is details are like things like grass and I guess that's where you'd probably want your bushes and things that you wouldn't collide with per se. So we've got a lot of stuff we just covered, okay? And there's this is mostly placing things. This is kind of all I want to cover. So we've got the first-person controllers, we've got prefabs, we've got using the editor, and we've got terrain, okay? There is some lighting stuff I want to talk about, okay? And I mentioned that Unity uses a physically based rendering thing. Your terrain is not really part of that pipeline. It's again, you're really only going to use terrain for kind of like prototyping environments. Eventually, you can actually export your terrain and start editing it. But we got this directional light, okay? And you can see the shadows, right? If I move this directional light, like, things actually change, and we've got all this lighting going on. And, you know, shadows and lighting are, like, one of the most expensive things your game engine can do, so, at least for now, don't go too wild with lighting, but feel free to experiment. So, like, you can change the color of your scene. You know, just a little bit can make it vastly different. It's not going to make it necessarily look great, but, you know, you can do it. You can do whatever you'd like. You can change how intense it is. You can really blow it out. I guess it does use pure light. It bounces, like, this is how often the lights bounce, and man, there's a ton of different things you can do here, but there's directional lights, and if you want to make new lights, you go to Game Object Light. You can make point lights, okay? And here you can see point lights. You can actually drag these handles, okay? And if you've used a point light in Maya, that acts very much the same way. It's just a point in space that emits light. And this is good if you want to, like, light up something specific. And you can also change the intensity. And this doesn't contribute to any indirect lighting. There are different kinds of lights. You can actually take any light and you can change it. So I could change this to a directional light. Again, we could have two, which is not going to do a lot, but you could. We have the point light, and we could have a spotlight. Okay, a spotlight behaves like any spotlight. And remember, so lights are game objects. Okay, so say you want like a lamp, right, and you want the lamp to move around or something, or I don't know, you have it. You can make these lights children. Okay, so let's go make this point light a child of our geometry prefab. Okay, and I'm gonna put it at the root. Okay. But I actually want, and I want it to align. Whoop. Okay. Let's see. I want to rotate it 90 degrees about its x-axis, so it's pointed at the thing. I want to make a spotlight on this guy. Okay. Spotlight on our super sick, like, falling geometry thing. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and move this way, down a little bit, okay? Point lights, shadow type. We'll make this emit some shadows, okay? Again, you're not really going to be doing this with an environmental light as too. Like, you really only want one Shadowcaster. But that's not necessarily true. It depends how you're going to compose your scene. So we can let those go. Look at that. We got some shadows. If we had a mesh, you would even see our own shadow if we were on here. So, you know, that's a good chunk of stuff. Let's save this. Alright, I'm going to put this in the scene folder. We'll call it Terrain Explorer. Yeah, let's call it Terrain Gallery. Okay? And, I want to show you guys how to build. Okay, it's the last thing I want to go over. Okay? So let's say, like, you've made your super rad game, okay? And you want to build it. That is, you want to make an executable and share it with other people. There is the build settings panel, okay? And the build settings panel, you open it, and we have a bunch of different options. These are all the different platforms Unity can target. And when you were installing Unity, you selected which ones you wanted. You got the web player, PC, iOS, Android, etc., etc. for this purpose, we're going to be building to PC, Mac, and Linux standalone builds. And these are actually like 3 sub-platforms. So if I click this, you'll see there's Windows and Mac OS X, because those are the ones that I wanted to install. So you can only... We're only going to be dealing with like single scene builds for a little while. We'll talk about how you can have multiple scenes and what happens, but the first scene you add in your build is the one that's going to be built. So we're going to build the terrain gallery, okay? And we're going to build this as an executable, and then I could send somebody the executable, and they'd be able to play the game. That'd be kind of fun. So I've added the scene to the build, okay? And it's always going to load whatever scene 0 is. Like programming stuff is 0 based in the build settings. So I could add this, but we'll never see it. So I'm just going to delete it, and you have to use the delete key to get rid of that. And I can build to any platform. This is the coolest thing about Unity, in my opinion, is how easy it is to build for different platforms. If you are a Unity developer, you are also an iOS developer, and an Android developer, and a web developer. You know WebGL. You don't necessarily know, but you can build to it. And that's really cool. Every platform has a bunch of different settings, okay? So if I hit this player settings, we're going to get something popping up in the inspector. We can also open up this menu just by going to edit, project settings, file, build settings, player settings. That's what we did. Edit project settings player. That's right. Okay, so you can like give your game an app icon. We could be really weird. We could give it something that was built in. We can change the mouse cursor in the app. I'm not going to do that. We can change the name, and I'll just I'll give the name of my company, which is called Sweet Roll Studio, and we'll give this the project name. We'll call this like Epic Terrain Gallery 9000, okay? And that's the name of the executable we'll get. There are a bunch of other settings.